All right, Leslie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. So, I always start off with an introduction for people who may be meeting you for the first time. In your own words, who is Leslie Draffin?
So, I am a certified menstrual cycle coach, a feminine embodiment mentor, a podcast host, and a former TV news anchor who is passionate about eradicating shame around our cycles, our bodies, and sex, and really helping people come back home to their bodies. As someone who has been very disconnected from her body most of her life, I find that that's the medicine that I have needed most. And as I work with clients and do my own healing and then guide them and work with them, it's really just the thing that's lit me up from the inside out.
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely going to dive deeper into it. I really loved just the message that you put out there, and I want to talk about it more a little bit later of just coming back to home. I feel like a lot of women, especially, tend to lose themselves in the process of becoming moms or becoming wives or achieving success in careers and all the things. I'm sure you can relate. And I know a lot of the listeners that are checking out the show today can relate to it. But before we even jump into that, I have every single guest come on and talk a little bit about what life was like growing up. So I want to know in your own words, and you talk about as much or as little as you're comfortable with sharing. Tell my audience, how was baby Leslie? What was she like?
Baby Leslie was high strung and intense. And my mom would tell you that from day one. I was fiercely independent. I just had this need to be intense about all things. Now, what you should know is that I'm adopted. I was adopted at 1 month old. And as I have done my own healing and spiritual awakening, I discovered so much trauma that I know I incurred in utero from my birth mom, who was 12 when I was conceived and 13 when I was born, just barely turned 13 like a couple weeks before. She got kicked out of her house. She didn't know she was pregnant until she was like 6 months along. Definitely some abuse earlier in her life for sure. And so, what I'm now understanding is part of, I think, the reason why I was hyper vigilant, hyper independent, and a worried, anxious child was because of that. Because my childhood with my parents was very happy. I was raised in a very religious household. My dad was a preacher. So there was a ton of religious, now I understand trauma. But at that point, I was very devout, going to church multiple times a week, like a good little Christian soldier. And I was happy for the most part. But as I grew, that anxiety and that intensity, that drive just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then as a teenager, I started suffering from eating disorders, anorexia, and bulimia almost immediately after I became a sophomore in high school, which was also coincidentally 9/11. And so now, as I've gotten in my mid 30s, looking back, I was very happy from the outside looking in. I was fully supported, taken care of. We didn't have a ton of stuff, but we never wanted anything. But then looking back, I'm like, oh, what there was all this underlying other stuff going on too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious to know, were you able to ever have a relationship with your birth mother as you went on your spiritual awakening personal development journey? How was that?
Yes, of course. So I was in a closed adoption in South Carolina through a company called Bethany Christian Services. Teen Mom, season one, the girl whose baby gets adopted, they used Bethany as well. And so it was in the 80s. I mean, this was super closed. And because she was so, so young, the information that I was finally able to access in my mid 20s was like mostly redacted and mostly like very general. But it was after Angelina Jolie had like all those genetic tests, and I was like, I don't know who I am really, that I thought, okay, let me just try to find who this person is. And I contacted the organization. I had to sign some forms. And the weird part was that, I mean, I was probably 25, 26, maybe a little older at this point. My caseworker, when she finally got back in touch with me, because it takes a while, she was like, you're not going to believe this, but your birth mom signed the same forms within a week of you signing the forms, having no contact, having no idea who I was. Something was happening in that week where she wanted to release her information to me and I wanted to get it. So We have not met in person, but we are friends on Facebook, and I have talked like on FaceTime for several hours. And it's interesting because as I get older, I see myself in her. Like I see that I look like her. Now, she doesn't know who my dad was. So there's still that half of me that's very in the dark about that part of myself. But what's interesting in kind of a fucked up way, I can tell her shit that I don't even feel like I can tell my mom. And now I don't really have a very close relationship with my parents ever since I've become an adult and I have had my own trauma and really been deconstructing my Christian background and Christian beliefs. They, of course, are very supportive and they love me, but like I don't tell them shit. But Robin, who is my birth mom, I'll tell her shit on Facebook through messages. And it's just so strange. And I talked to my therapist about that. You have the ability to feel like you can tell her whatever because there's no judgment around her judging you. She's just going to take what she can get from you because that's what you're allowing her to have versus your own parents. You feel like you're letting them down, disappointing them. Whereas with her, it's not. So it's been fascinating. I'm hoping to actually meet her in the future. And another weird synchronicity is I was in a foster home for a month between the time I was born and the time my parents got me. And that's actually a really long time for infants, especially with Bethany. And the drama was that my birth mom's mom wanted to take me and raise me as her daughter. And my birth mom was like over my fucking dead body. She knew how many of the men that were in her mother's life had done bad things to her. She's like, I will never bring a baby into this. So for that month, the foster family called me Hannah. And when I connected with Robin, she has a daughter named Hannah.
Shut the fuck
Fucking
up.
wild. Yeah. Wild.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tell you to shut the fuck up, but I'm just like, oh my God, that's insane. That legit sounds like a Lifetime movie. And I really do appreciate you sharing that because I do have a daughter. I'm a single mom. She's 13 and her father has not been in her life since she was about 2 years old. He signed away his rights, like completely disappeared off the face of the earth. Truth be told, I don't even know if he's dead or alive, and I don't want to know. I've dealt with my own trauma and healing from that. But recently, I asked her, we did this whole cleansing ceremony for the end of 2022, just setting intention and letting go of shit from the past. And I asked her, I was like, do you think in the future you would ever try to pursue finding your father? And she told me, yeah. And I'm going to support her no matter what. Do I want her to go down that road selfishly? No, because I don't want her to experience the pain of opening up that wound. So, for you being someone who experienced something similar, and this is why I love having this open conversation, because this is even a question that I'm asking that I have written down. But for someone like my daughter, as she gets older and wants to go down that road, what is one piece of advice you would share with that person, whoever is listening, when it comes to wanting to pursue that other side that they don't know?
Yeah, I think it's really to go into the situation, first of all, knowing what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, and set that fucking boundary because you're in charge. As the kid, they have to be the person in charge because that was one thing that kind of pissed me off in the very beginning when I was connecting with my birth mom. The caseworker was like, here's her information and you contact her on your own time. But she had also gotten my information. So she actually reached out to me first. And I felt like a little, whoa, I wasn't quite ready for it. So I think coming up with your own very strong boundaries and then kind of letting go of expectation because you don't know what the fuck you're going to find. Like you said, he could be dead in jail. He could be in rehab. He could be like on the other side of the world being a billionaire. Like who fucking knows, right? So letting go of the expectation. And for me, as somebody who I can take it or leave it, whether or not I ever find out who my dad is, for me, it's medical. It's always been about the medical side of it, but also as I get into, and I'm a witch. So as I get into this very spiritual side of myself, the ancestor connection. I feel like I don't have any ancestors. I feel like I don't know who the fuck they are. And so for me, that's also something in the back of my head, but having boundaries, letting go of the expectation, I think would be key.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that 100% because I know there's a lot of people who have that trauma that it's sitting there, but it's that voice that you want to pursue it, but just be careful in navigating through that road. And like I said, I'll try to be as supportive as I can for her, but it's her journey to take. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now we're going to go into your adult life before this beautiful being that you are today. In your guest application, I want to read it verbatim because I don't want to butcher it, but you wrote, in my life, I've overcome shame around my cycle, PCOS, 2 decades of eating disorders, and a major mental health struggle that saw me leaving my 15-year career as a TV news anchor to focus on my passion, helping guide the way for others to come home to their bodies and womb spaces. The major lesson for me in this life has been that I am valuable no matter how productive I am. I love that. I love the quotations. And realizing that hustle culture and boss babe energy is a tool of the patriarchy to keep us, most often women and femmes, down by creating dis-ease. First of all, when I read that, I was like, yo, she's preaching. This is my vibe. She needs to be on the show. So let's talk a little bit about what your journey was like, all of those experiences. The floor is yours.
So, first of all, wow, past Leslie, like, damn, you really put that shit into words perfectly.
She's a bad bitch.
Yes. I must have been in my ovulating phase when I put that on there.
I'm here for it.
So, for me, it's back to when I was a kid, right? I was intense, I was anxious, and I was very much a people pleaser and a perfectionist. And I used to say about adopted kids in general, you're either the one who is terrified they'll give you back or the one that's like, fuck you, you're not my parents. And so my sister is also adopted, and she was the fuck you, you're not my real parents. And I was the one, oh my God, let me do everything perfect. Please don't send me back. And so now what I've realized is that wasn't just because of the trauma that has to do with adoption, because I think that when we speak about trauma, it's how you react to whatever has happened to you in your life, regardless of what the actual incident was. A very beautiful thing still can sometimes create trauma down the line. And now it's much more, okay, it wasn't just this idea that I wasn't really their kid. It was the entire societal programming and church programming. Your worth is what you look like, how much you fucking get done, how much you're able to manage X, Y, and Z. And so as I go into my high school years, my college years, I mean, I was salutatorian, excellent grades, excellent SATs, did like 3 sports, captain of the cheerleading squad, secretary of the school, all that shit. It was all of these criteria and these accolades and these honors that I felt like I needed to accumulate in order to boost up my value and my worth. And the fucked up part was when you see someone who's like that, you're like, oh my God, you're so driven. You're so passionate. You're so good at everything. You're so motivated. But like internally now, I felt like shit about myself and I needed to do all the things to put on this armor of worth. In reality, I didn't ever have to do anything to prove that I was worthy. And that for me has been the last year lesson. So throughout my entire 20s, anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, which is addicted to clean eating or like exercising off everything you eat, Adderall addiction, mostly just drinking alcohol. My calories came from bread and rotisserie chicken and like booze, I remember. And then just finally over the last couple years since my spiritual awakening in 2019, trying to uncover all of that good girl archetypal bullshit. And as much as I possibly can, while, yes, one way would be to say, fuck you, I'm not that. But doing the inner work to understand that slowing down is perfectly valid and healthy. And not doing is just as much of a radical statement as doing everything. And that's for me been like the last year. I feel like I've lived 17 lifetimes in the last couple of years. And I think that 2020 did that to us. But I also have felt I barely know who I was 6 months ago versus 6 years ago versus 16 years ago. There's just this constant evolution happening, which I'm really grateful for. But shit is fucking tough, messy, and dark in those places as well at times.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that last part because especially on social media and in this day and age, people love saying, "Oh, I'm healing, I'm doing the work." And they make it seem like it's this beautiful, peaceful, just calm serenity. No. Okay, I say it all the time and I had a whole episode dedicated to it that healing is very fucking ghetto. If you really take it seriously, it's uncomfortable, it's dark, it's really getting into the deep, dark part of you that's fucked up, that you don't wanna see. People love to throw around the word "my inner shadow," right? So if you really want to do the work, just know it's gonna be uncomfortable. And I know you mentioned that you had your spiritual awakening in 2019. If you're comfortable with sharing, what was that like for you? What was your quote unquote rock bottom moment that you decided some shit's gotta fucking change?
For me, it was my entire 20s, late 20s specifically. I had a messy fucking divorce, just to like abbreviate the shit, but to show you how wild it was. I was the person who was working. He had gotten out of the military. I was supporting him, moved to a new place to take this job that was extremely jump in salary. He ended up staying behind, finish up some school, got a friend of a friend pregnant. No one told me. And I finally find out 6 months into this lady's pregnancy, but I, being that people pleaser, late 20s, I'll be damned if I fucking lose. And my therapist finally had to tell me after like 6 weeks of going to therapy, trying to drag this man to therapy, is he a prize worth winning? Thank you, Jenny, for fucking saying that shit, because no, he wasn't, but I needed someone else to tell me. So that, oh, was some dark ass shit. Like the job was hard. I was a news anchor, 5-hour morning news, 5 days a week. I mean, it was like getting run over by a pack of stampeding elephants daily. I had a boss who just would pick me apart. Of course, I was still anorexic. I was my lowest weight I've ever been at that point. I was drunk all the time. And in the year after the divorce, I was just on a fucking spree because I got married super young, was super Christian before that. And so I had not had a lot of sexual encounters. So it was like my freak flag flying for that 1 year. My therapist called me the cocaine year. Didn't do cocaine, but it was on that level of just kind of cracked out. And so that I think just rolled itself into a lot of rock bottoms. But what was funny is at the end of that year, I met my now husband, who I credit for helping me with my eating disorder because he is like a really good cook, chef, has his own food truck. I didn't want to throw up the food he was making me, right? Finally, all the therapy, I just needed to get a man who could cook really well. So that started kind of helping me get out of the rock bottom. But for me, and a lot of people do say the spiritual awakening comes out of the dark night of the soul. I think for me, there's been a lot of iterations of that. And so when I had the spiritual awakening, I remember how it felt. It was in January of 19. I was underneath the full wolf moon in Austin, Texas, looking at this moon, feeling it vibrate my whole body, like from my pussy, like all the way to the top of my head. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so that whole year, I just went about it in a very people pleasing, perfectionist way. I'm going to learn all the things. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to have like an hour-long morning routine. And I wanted it to look quote unquote perfect. And so that fucking fell away in 2020 real quick. And since then, it's really just been about discovering ways to make my inner magic become awakened in little ways and ride the tide of the dark nights of the soul. Because last year, 2022, was a fucking horrible year for me, on par probably with like the worst year in my 20s. So it's just been like this, I want to say fun, but also fucked up roller coaster of some days it's great and some days it's not. But I think everything here on this planet is there for us as a soul to learn from. And like we decided to incarnate in this body, this meat suit for this lifetime to experience all this shit. And I try to remind myself that like even when it's horrible, there's a reason why I wanted to come here and do it.
Mm. I love that. I love that so much. And it really just reemphasizes a quote that my life coach said to me when I worked with her after going through my personal development journey. I'll never forget it. There is a message in the mess. And I say that shit all the time. And if you really like hear that, yes, it's hard to see it when you're in the dark times, when you're struggling, when you're going through it, when you feel like you can't go anymore. But if you're able to reach that other side, you're going to look back at it and you'll be like, all right, God, okay, universe, I understand why you had me in that season of turmoil in order for me to grow. I think it's so important for us to really honor those moments and not just try to celebrate the wins and the highlight reels and all that. Like true growth, in my opinion, happens when you're in the fucking mud, when you're in the trenches, when you don't know where to go, left, right, up, down, when you feel like, yo, I fucking can't anymore. That is when the growth happens. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I love that message of your life coach too. The message in the mess, or the mess in the message. What was it again?
The message is in the mess.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to write that.
Write that one down. Yes. And I think that's a perfect segue to the next part of the question that I want to ask you, because you're all about finding a way to come home to your body. So for people who are hearing that for the first time, be like, what the fuck is she talking about? Can you explain that in a little bit more of a way that they can understand? What does that mean to you?
I think for me, it means that, and it's something that I've struggled with my entire life. It's this feeling of feeling disconnected from something that we should be at home in our body. Like this is our home on this planet. Yet there is so often for so many people a disconnect. right? And it can have a lot to do with if you've had eating disorders, if you have had sexual trauma, if you have had birth trauma, if you have had any type of bullying around what you look like. And so for me, helping people come home to their body, it's extremely personal and individualized for one thing. And it changes day to day for me as well. But what's helped so significantly, and I think the way that I can describe it is starting to understand that while we aren't our body, we also are our body. In the beginning of my spiritual path, it was like, I'm not my body, so I can like ignore my body, especially as I was trying to heal from all those eating disorders. I can just ignore it and I will just nourish it in air quotes, but like nourish it by ignoring it, which is not the fucking way. And now, from what I am doing on my own, it's facing the days that you feel like shit. Like when you feel like you don't look your best, you don't feel your best, your body hurts, telling your body and telling yourself, I love you. I understand that you've gotten me through some shit. And this has recently been what my practice is. I will like touch all the parts of my body. I'm like, thank you for holding me, legs. Thank you for holding me, arms. Thank you for holding in the hurt. Thank you for holding in the grief. Thank you for holding in all the things. I'm here for you and I'm going to fucking support you. And we're going to get through this shit together. There's like all these practices people will say to do like mirror work and like all that wild shit. That can be triggering as fuck, especially if you have body image issues. And my friend actually pointed this out. I was like, I guess I should do mirror work. She's like, no, you shouldn't fucking do mirror work. If you can't look at yourself
You
in
hate
the
looking in
mirror,
the fucking
yeah.
mirror.
So it's just been a gradual thing. In my work as a menstrual cycle coach, what's helped me significantly get into my body is practicing cyclical living. So for those who have a cycle, and I call it women and menstruators, because not all women bleed and not all who menstruate are women. So if you can start tuning into the cycle of your body, and if you don't have a natural cycle, the cycle of the moon, what you can start to do is give yourself more grace, because there are going to be days when you feel like shit. And then there's going to be days when you feel on top of the world. And so it's important to remember on the shitty days that the other days are coming, and you know they're coming because you're cyclical. Our whole entire world is set up for male hormones, which is basically like the sun. They rise and fall every day, every day, every day, every day. But those of us who are cyclical beings and in tune with the moon, we're very predictable and we are very same month to month, right? So there's going to be days when we're like, why do I not feel right? And for me, coming home to my body, oh, my body is telling me this is a time to go inward. My body is telling me this, and I'm going to listen and I'm going to love myself through it. And I think that I have some issues with like the body positivity movement. For me, it's kind of tricky. Like I almost like to look at it from a way of sort of body neutrality, but also a place of compassion, compassionate neutrality. Like I understand the whole body positive, like I'm going to love myself no matter what. But like when I can't look at my own fucking self in the mirror, you're not going to tell me to do self-love. So it's like understanding that, first of all, what happens today may not be the same thing that happens tomorrow. And that's because you're cyclical. And also just this profound acknowledgement of we have been through this together, me and my body, and we're going to be on this fucking road the whole goddamn life. People that I'm with, my husband may come or go, my dog may come or go, my friends, but like this shit, me and her are like,
That's it. That's all you got at the end of the day. And I love, love, love that you're saying that, because that is the journey that I'm on now. I shared about it on season 1 of my podcast, but I recently had weight loss surgery because I was just dealing with a lot of health issues when it came to my weight. And I had it on November 2nd. And it's super fresh. 2 months ago, 2 months to the day. Yes. Oh, wow. 2 months to the day. I didn't even realize that. I'm almost down 40 pounds, which is celebration. Yes, I feel amazing. But there are those days that I'm like, I regret having the surgery. There's days that I get sick. I'm like, fuck, why did I do this to myself? There's days that I go to the gym. I'm like, I don't want to fucking be here. There's days that I'm thinking like, damn, maybe it'll just be easier to stay fat. And then looking in the mirror, now I'm looking in the mirror and I'm seeing the changes, which is probably the hardest thing for someone like me who, for the first 33 years of my life, was just my worst fucking enemy and just nitpicked every single thing about me. So to change that narrative now, it's fucking hard, but I know it's helping me in my own growth journey, in my own physical, mental, emotional health. But I just love that you said that, like, there's some days that are hard, some days that you feel on top of the world, but it's always going to come around full circle at the end of the day. And I think it's important for people to remember that. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about why you think being a menstrual coach and female empowerment embodiment coach, why do you think there is so much embarrassment for women and maybe some of your clients when it comes to being in tune with their body, with their self image, with their sexuality? Why is it so taboo? And how can we move through those negative feelings in a healthy way?
Oh God. Okay. So the short answer is that diet culture, the patriarchy, and our society in general set this bar so fucking high that nobody can attain it. And what we do is we spend millions, billions of dollars and fucking hours, years of our life trying to attain a standard that is put too high for a reason. Because when we are so caught up in this shame spiral, in this striving to look better, to be better, to accomplish all of the things, we are forgetting and not paying attention to very important and key shit. Right. So for me, this became extremely evident after I read a book called Unapologetic Eating. And it was like, do a time log of all of the time you spend, beauty shit, working out, meal prep, and all that stuff. And it was like 76 days a year for me, a year that I was spending trying to attain something outside of myself. And I feel like that is so damaging because it disconnects us from what actually matters. It keeps us striving towards this, let's be honest, male imposed quote unquote rule. And it's the patriarchy in general, because there are women who boost up the patriarchy just like there are men. And for me, that's just so fucking damaging because it takes us outside of ourselves and it distracts us. So while we're busy doing that, we don't pay attention to what's happening to the planet. We don't pay attention to what's happening to oppressed and marginalized people. We don't pay attention to what's happening with our fucking lawmakers who are voting in asinine ways because we're like, oh, wait, I have to like lose 5 pounds to like look like this trend or get my fucking buckle fat or whatever the fuck it's called. Have you seen this face fat shit? I'm like getting that taken out. And it's like, those are distractions. There are distractions put in place for a very specific reason. And it's first of all, so that you don't pay attention to what's happening around you and you don't speak up. But also, I think it's to keep you from understanding that you are a divine being. And when you are in your power, nobody can fuck with you.
Mm. Come on, say that again. I don't think they heard you.
When you're in your power, nobody can fuck with you, right? And it's like, for me, it took checking the fuck out of diet culture and riding the waves that have happened since. And also just understanding that the systems in place are racist and they are fucking patriarchal and they are oppressive. And while I am not an idiot, I don't think that me particularly potentially could be like the one to change it all. Me talking to you and people listening to this and then them talking to their friends and them talk like that's how the change happens. Just becoming aware. Even if you don't really change that much, but just you understand and you're aware of it, for me is kind of the key. And why it's so bad for us, you know, like I said, it does disconnect us. It does keep us small. It keeps us from feeling lit up from within. And while social media is out there just like running amok, sending all of these messages to us, I think that if we can find a way to come home to our body, like I said, and understand that you and the body that you're in are like relationship number one, what's going to happen between the two of you is more important than other outside forces. Then I think that that can be something that really does help you understand what it can be like to feel fully empowered and to feel fully within yourself, and stop also engaging in and consuming the things that are of the beauty industry, of the patriarchy, of the outside societal things that kind of like preach these ideas to you, especially when you're in this stage of healing.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. Like you just worded it perfectly. And this platform that I'm creating is to have these uncomfortable conversations and to hope that the people who are listening, it sparks something in your mind. It's like, she's fucking right. And I'm going to use my voice to take my power back and to have these conversations that we need to be having. So thank you for wording it so perfectly. I think there's something else that I want to talk about since we're in the new year, and it's like the perfect segue to the next part of the question. You shared a reel recently that I fucking loved. I loved it. I saved it. I screenshot it. I was like, oh, we're going to talk about it when she comes on the show. So you talked about that New Year's resolutions are a scam and some are incredibly damaging for our physical and mental health. So I want to dive deeper into that because, like I said, we're in this new year, new me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everyone loves to have these resolutions that only last for so long. Talk a little bit more about that and why it's so toxic to society.
Well, first of all, I think that the reason why a lot of people's resolutions don't really work is we're not planning resolutions in a very good time of the year. So January 1st is like this arbitrary first date of the Gregorian calendar. But like when you look at the seasons, what the fuck is nature doing right now? Are they planting new shit? No, they're not. Like it's still frozen. So this is a time for you to be in like the death mode. Death and rebirth cycles are what keep the planet alive. And so you and me and all of us listening in the middle of winter and those of us at January 1st, 2nd, whenever, this is a time to be inward, to be resting, to be, like you said, hibernating. We're just chilling. And so that right there is one reason why your shit may not work. But when you also pay attention to like what all the fuck the resolutions are, where are they coming from? Lose weight. What does that boost? The diet industry. How much fucking money does that make off people every year? Billions. Okay. Getting organized. That's also a tool of capitalism. I'm trying to think of like the really important ones. Now, if you're trying to like stop smoking or stop drinking, I fully support those. I am also sober right now. Those things, okay. But I also don't feel that's a resolution. So I think that, and I think I talked about this in the caption, the difference for me is the resolution versus the intention. Because for me, a resolution is like a hardline goal, like I'm going to do this. And it most often comes from a should outside of ourselves. I should lose weight. I should go to the gym. And the first thing I have my clients do is like take should out of the vocabulary and just shift it to the word could, because it feels like it's much more expansive. But also it's like, okay, an intention is for me, a statement or an idea or a theme that comes from a place of positive love. So my intention this year, and it's on my episode that dropped today on my own podcast, it's to slow the fuck down. My message from last year was slow down, and the universe was like a blinking light. It was like, hey, watch me, watch me, watch me until I slam the fuck into the cliff. So slow down is the theme. And that's probably going to be my only resolution for like years to come. Intention resolution. So think of something that if you want to improve your life is coming from a place of love, and then like don't do it till March. Because when spring pops off, that's when it's going to be more natural. And I think that the other thing is in 3 weeks, because I think it's on average, people fail, quote unquote, their resolution, I think like 21 days or something, or like it's definitely in January. The shame spiral of the collective after all these people stop, then is going to be like, oh, wait. Not that the diet didn't work, I failed. Not that the exercise routine didn't work, I'm lazy. Not that I couldn't quit smoking because of the fucking addictive shit that the industry puts in it. I'm weak. That shame spiral is just going to really, and I think that's why like the middle of January is so depressing for a lot of people. But all those things put together, it's like the outside forces, like we talked about before, are the things that are encouraging you to change something about yourself at this point in the year. And while I love changing myself and I love doing things to, and I hate really the word improve, but like I love learning and I love trying new things, I also understand that like right now in the middle of winter is not the best time. So as a period coach, I would be remiss if I didn't connect this to the cycle. But would you start brand new shit in your period?
Hell no.
No, you fucking wouldn't. You wouldn't be like, let me just like start walking 10,000 steps and dieting and like trying new things. No, because you're resting, you're relaxing, your body might not feel that great. That's where we're at in the season of the fucking planet. Winter is your period. You're not going to do new shit on your period. You're going to be at home, cuddled up, watching TV, reading a book, eating chocolate, whatever you're doing, comfy clothes. You're not trying to be out there changing the world. That's for in inner spring, inner summer.
Mm. Y'all heard it here first, okay? It's okay to not follow the trends and just to have a fucking seat, okay?
And I honestly think like that's the radical part. Like it's not radical to be like every other person that's like, let me lose 10 pounds this year. No, the radical thing is like, I'm going to understand what this really is about. The capitalism, the whole idea. I mean, even the self-improvement industry is like $1 billion shit, right? And it's just taking radical authority of your own mind at times and of your own choices to be like, okay, I see what's happening. I see you. And I'm going to do something different.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that like your journey is your journey. Like for me, when I had my surgery, like that was it for me. That was like, you know what? I need this tool if I really want to make a permanent change because I was that type of person for so long in my 20s and my 30s, like the yo yo diets going back and forth, doing the New Year resolution and then falling off and all of that. But I knew, like, for me and my own personal journey, I had to do something drastic in order to make it a sustained and long lasting goal. So just remember, like, it's your timeline and you don't need to reach a certain goal by a certain time period. And if you don't, then you're a failure. Fuck that. Like we said before, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. But as long as you're consistently working through it every single day and taking time to rest as well, you're golden in my eyes. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So I want to know, you've been on your own healing journey, personal development. So, what are some tools that you have used on your own journey that you feel would be beneficial with sharing with my audience? Just a couple.
I love that you're asking this question because I have a hot take. So, meditation, obviously, I'm a meditation teacher as well. And meditation looks a billion different ways. It's not what you have seen in TV where you're like sitting in this super static position with your legs crossed and like a fucking pretzel and you have no thoughts. It can be all the things. And honestly, just as important is just understanding how to be present with your thoughts. And what I find people maybe don't understand is the act of thinking a thought. I'm thinking about how I'm sitting here in this chair and there's a doorknob here and I'm talking to Leanne, and it's like, that's presence. That's being mindful because I'm thinking about it versus like if you've ever driven somewhere and you're like, oh shit, I'm here.
How the fuck did I get here? Yeah.
It used to happen all the time when I go to work.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing that I've recently really been using is magic mushrooms. I've been using psilocybin. So I have to say, as this disclaimer, I'm not encouraging the use of illegal substances, which may or may not be controlled wherever you live. But for me, it's been plant medicine that has seen me through the shit of the last 12 months. So I started microdosing with a coach last March. And then all hell broke loose, and the trauma and the drama of last summer continued to microdose. And now, coming out the other side of it, I'm actually studying to become a microdosing practitioner to help people guide them on their own journeys. But it's just something about using the mushrooms. It's like the messages I have gotten on mushrooms while I've meditated. And if you're not familiar with what microdosing is, it's taking like a sub-perceptual dose. It's a tiny little dose, and it still has the impact of being able to rewire your neural pathways, open up your brain to more neural pathways. And for me, it's helped me uncover self-limiting beliefs and move through them, and also move through the grief. Like, I lost two of my three dogs last summer. I let go of a job that I wanted since I was 10, and there's been a fuckload of grief. And so the mushrooms have held me, and I have gotten messages like, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And people can tell you that, but it's just something about, for me, being in a meditation after taking a microdose where it's like, it felt like the universe came down and just hugged me in this beautiful, beautiful way. If you're interested in exploring that, there are a ton of amazing resources out there. The Ancestor Project, I'm obsessed with. I've taken many of their courses. Double Blind is also great. Access Mundi is what I'm taking my course with, but it's just something that's helped me. And then the other thing I think that helps me a lot is deciding to be sober curious. So over the last 3 years, I have experimented on and off with conscious sobriety and then gone back to drinking, right? Like, I'm a complete wino. And what I've just been able to uncover in myself is, why am I drinking? Am I using it to avoid feelings? Am I using it to numb out? And when that does happen, I am now conscious enough and mindful enough to be like, okay, I see what's happening. We're not going to change anything right now because we've already had 3 glasses of wine, but like, we're not judging ourselves. But that's just like the little shift of the consciousness that for me has been very helpful. And the last thing is living in tune with my cycle and understanding, like I've said before, that everything is going to come back. It's like a wheel, right? So like, it's okay that today might not feel that great because tomorrow will feel better. And even though next month you'll have a day that feels not that great, you understand that that's all within the natural cycle and the natural rhythm of your soul, of your body, of your womb, of your cycle.
Mm. I fucking love that. And thank you so much for sharing about I'm going to call them magic mushrooms. I once tried them. I was with my ex, the abusive one who's in prison, and nothing happened that day, which I think is a sign from God that, like, you were not in the right space and you were not around the right person to have that journey. But I've known a few people and I've watched documentaries, and a lot of people have said that it was like just a magical experience, but you need to set like that intention because it can also go the opposite way. So, maybe one day I'll experiment with that. But thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. We talked about it a little bit before, but I want to know what would be some advice that you would tell my audience when it comes to dealing with those not so great mental health days and how they can navigate through that? What has helped you the most that you think could be beneficial for those sad girl days? Some days are bad bitch days, other days are sad girl days. So, how can we move through those sad girl days?
First, tell yourself that this isn't how it's always going to be. Today is not forever. And then also, it's really good to have some things that you know are like going to bring you joy. So I have made a list of like everything that brought me joy. And it was on a bad bitch day. Now that's the case. You want to do it on a day when you feel really great because you'll be expansive and you'll think of like the smallest things. Then tune back on the sad girl day to the list. Now, if you haven't done the work to do a list previous, just try to think and put your feet on the ground, whether or not you're sitting in a chair, if you want to go sit on the earth, if you can, but just feeling all the things, the sensations in your body. Like, how do your toes feel? How does the bottom of your foot feel? How does the ankle feel? And moving all the way up, like a body scan is what that's called. And then, okay, maybe your sad girl day has to do with some body image issues. That's certainly a lot of my sad girl days. Okay, where can I touch my body that it feels, first of all, like a yes, like a consensual yes for me? Because sometimes me putting my hands on my belly, it's like, no, bitch. My knees for me are like really good in this, like just tickling that, like feeling that. What does it feel like? And getting really down into like the minutia of what is the feeling? Is it a good feeling? Is it a bad feeling? Does it feel tickly? Okay. And so then you could explore with different textures, right? You could rub your hand on something really soft or something prickly. You could then explore different tastes. And so for me, it's almost this idea of when my brain is like, I am having the shittiest of days because I'm mentally having a bad day. If I can force myself to be in my body and do some embodiment practices, because that's honestly what this is: feeling in your body, textures, breath, taste, playing really great music. All of those can be ways to get you out of your head in a way and teach you that even on days that are fucking horrible, there are things that can feel good. The last thing is watch a fucking show, like a comfort show. Like, come on. I have rewatched certain episodes of certain fucking TV shows like a million fucking times. And knowing that that's something that I can go to if I really want to just disassociate from whatever sadness is happening, if nothing else feels like it's working. And I'm a very internal person, like a very introvert, which is interesting since I was on TV news for like 15 years of my life. But like I was extroverted only because I had to be. So for me, it's never really been about like hanging out with friends. But if that's something that brings you joy, like call a friend. For me, it's like pet my dog, look into his eyes and be like, do you love me as much as I love you?
Same.
And then answer for him. Yes, mommy.
Yes. Give yourself that
Of
validation.
course.
Yeah.
So those are just some tips work really well for me.
I love that, and I just love the theme of the episode. It's just, like, really just coming back to self. I think that is the most powerful thing when you're going through those sad girl days, like, being self-aware to know I'm feeling this way, and it's okay, and I'm giving myself grace, and I'm allowing myself to feel that way, and like you said, it's not gonna last forever because they never do. It might last a few days, it might last a couple weeks, which people do go through depressive episodes. I've gone through them myself. But there's always, like we said before, a message in the mess. There's always like a rainbow on the other side of these storm clouds that are in your life right now. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you the same questions that I ask each guest that comes on the show as we start to wind down the conversation. So the first one, what would you say is your superpower? Just one.
I saw this question beforehand. I should have fucking came up with something good. I think that my superpower is being a permissionary. It's giving people permission to be themselves in a way that feels authentic for them.
I love that. All right. So, what would you say has been one of the hardest life lessons that you've learned from as an adult?
slow the fuck down. I mean, seriously, like, that was the theme of last year, and I think that when you do slow down, shit's gonna come up. It's gonna be fucking hard because people you see all these, like, reels and TikToks about slow living, at least I do on my side of the internet. Slow living, intentional living, but, like, no one talks about when you go from being a good girl, people pleaser, perfectionist, overachiever to suddenly hard stop, slowing the fuck down, the messy shit in between. Like, the days you wake up and are like, "What the fuck am I doing with my life? What is my purpose? I haven't checked off any boxes today." The worth situation, like I was talking about earlier. So, the hardest thing has been to learn to slow down, and it's been the most important thing I've needed to learn, and it will probably be, like, the theme of my entire life at this point. It's understanding that this is a very cliche thing that people say, "You're a human being, not a human doing." When you think about that shit, it's so fucking true.
Absolutely. And a lot of people honestly haven't even gotten to that point yet. So thank you for sharing that vulnerability because it's fucking hard. It's like when I quit smoking cigarettes, and I know this is like completely different, but I quit cold turkey. I didn't do the gradual, like I just stopped. I stopped, like I left my abusive relationship. I hit my fucking rock bottom and I was like, I need to stop. And that fucking withdrawal period, oh God. But that's where the change happened. That's why I bring it up. Like in that uncomfortable period, in slowing down and stopping, that is where the change can happen. But just embrace those uncomfortable feelings that are going to come up. But like we said before, it's not going to last forever.
No, it's not. And then you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, aha, all of those things were messages, right? So, like the things that we've talked about, the things that came up for me and still come up for me, because I'm not saying that just because I have acknowledged these things, I'm not gonna also think about this in 2 weeks when I'm gonna be in my inner fall right before my period. Like, I'm gonna have a day, I know it. I'm gonna have a day when I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And I'm gonna be like, you know what you're doing with your life.
I
It's just
probably
a
have
day.
those like once a week, okay? Let's just be honest, but it's fine. I'm self aware.
And self-awareness doesn't mean that you aren't gonna come back to that exact same feeling later on. It's just that, okay, I'm aware. And for me, I think that's why this lesson has been so interesting because the universe was trying to show me this shit for decades. And it was like a tiny little road sign. I love a good like highway analogy. It was like a road sign that I passed and I didn't really notice. And then it was like a blinking light. And then it was like a stoplight. And then it was like me running through the barrier off the cliff until I slammed into the bottom and was like, bitch, you're slow now.
Absolutely. Yeah, like my life coach said, life is going to send you a message like poking you in the side with a thorn. It's going to keep poking you until you finally realize. And for me, hitting that rock bottom with my abusive relationship, God was trying to tell me something for so fucking long. And it wasn't until my life was almost taken away from me that I was like, okay, I'm going to listen now. So you're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast. So what is your definition of thriving?
Well, it certainly changed in the last year. I think for me now, in this moment, in this space, thriving is doing what I love in whatever way that looks like and being present in every situation, the good ones and the bad ones.
I fucking love that. That's one of the best answers that I've gotten. I've asked that question so many times, but just being in the moment and like we said before, accepting whatever comes. All right, go back to baby Leslie. What is one piece of advice you would tell her being the woman that you are today?
Oh my gosh. I've been asked this before too, which is funny. I'm like, okay, I think the biggest thing is like, you do not have to achieve to be worthy. You are worthy simply because you are here.
And give her a hug and tell her you love her.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's something I would definitely have to do to little Leanne. Like, just love yourself a little bit more. All right, final question before you plug in how we can work with you. What is an affirmation or a mantra that you practice daily and why?
Okay, so it comes from a book that I read last year, which is possibly like my all time favorite book. The book is called It's Not Your Money by Tosha Silver, and it talks about divine abundance and all that stuff. But there is an abundance prayer, and it's really long. I try to remember to say the prayer every day, but there's a part that I'm obsessed with, and it says, let everything that needs to go, go. Let everything that needs to come, come. And feeling that shit in your bones, especially the let everything that needs to come, come. Knowing that sometimes what needs to come is not the funnest fucking lesson. But like you said, the message in the mess, like that's where the juice is. Like that's where the nectar of life is. And like we've said before, you incarnated on this planet in this body to experience these things. So for me, that's just the one thing, especially since my dogs died, since I left the job. It's like letting it go, letting it go, and letting it go, and letting it go, and letting it come, and letting it come.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here. You are like a ray of light. I can just feel your energy through the computer screen. And I know so many people are going to want to follow you and know more about you and possibly work with you. So please let my audience know, where can we follow you online, your website, any offerings that you have going on. Please share them.
Awesome. So you can find me on Instagram at Leslie Draffin. My website is lesliedraffin.com. And then I also have my own podcast called The Light Within. As far as offerings, I have a self paced course that you can do on your own time if you'd like to explore cyclical living. And I'm also working on a mentorship for teenagers that I hopefully will be able to teach in like after school programs in my community in the next probably 6 to 12 months. But I devote a lot of time to working one on one with people. And I feel like that's where I really thrive. I also lead free meditations every Wednesday on my Instagram channel. So if you want to come
I
drop
caught one.
in, yep,
Hmm.
it's cycle informed by my fucking cycle. I'm not trying to say I know what your cycle is, but wherever I am on mine, we do, it's called Womb Wednesday. And it's a little break in the middle of your day to tap into your body.
I love that. Leslie, thank you so much for being here. This conversation has been so therapeutic for me. Keep showing up and doing what you're doing, because we need more women like you who are taking their power back, using their voice to create change. And I'm just excited to see what's to come for you. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, babe. This is great.